What was the best you have no power here moment you have ever seen? Part 4. When I was working customer service for a restaurant delivery service, not unlike DoorDash, I had a customer send in a complaint about hair in their food. The hair was sitting on top of the food. I checked their account. And they had one order on their account. Which is a red flag. I checked their phone number and find multiple accounts. Each other 1 to 2 orders. All of them complaining about hair in the food. I deny a refund because the customer has actually used the same identical photo for the last order since they ordered the same thing. The customer tries to argue with me. Threaten to never use the service again. Typical stuff that they always say. Eventually the customer gives up and ends the call. Then immediately tries again. I get the support request. See who it is. Then deny the refund again. She ends the call. Then tries again. The person behind me gets the call. I tap the person on the shoulder and show them what I pulled up on my screen and that person denies the refund. The next day she calls back and tries again and is outside of the refund window. So the customer demands to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor bans her from the service for multiple fraudulent refund requests. Yesterday, HR asked me if I wanted to use my own personal time for punching in 5 minutes late or if I wanted to take a tardy. My response was, I'm not taking shit because I was within the 7 minutes allowed under the resolved class action settlement. Unions are great. I went to a private Catholic all-boys school for a few years. There was one kid who was such a stereotypical bully he could have stepped out of the pages of an old comic book. One day during gym, he threw a basketball while my back was turned and hit me square in the small of the back. It hurt like a bitch and I'd had enough. I assumed starting a blatant fight in front of a teacher would get me hooped by a teacher. Suspended. Or honestly expelled. I didn't care. As I was a dumb kid and was seeing red. I walked right over to that boy who was smirking at me and punched him square in the jaw. He then cowered and tried to protect his face, so I kept swinging into any exposed part of his head I could reach until the PE coach pulled me off of him. He of course made a huge deal that he hadn't hit back and his friends agreed I'd attacked him for no reason. That same smirk returned to his face as the coach walked me out of the gym. The coach took me to the office and I was in sheer panic. I knew I was fucked. He handed me a stack of papers. The school's daily announcements for each classroom and told me to pass them out. I did and was back in that same PE class before the end of the period. The look of shock on the bully's face when he saw me is something I cherish to this day. He asked me, didn't they punish you? Aren't you suspended? And I responded with, yeah. They made me pass out the announcements. I really learned a lesson today with the biggest shit-eating grin I've ever worn. He stopped picking on me after that. But not anyone else. Was pulled over by ASHPs and they tried to ticket me for speeding, on a highway smack dab in the middle of an Indian reservation. He asked to see my ID, my registration. And to search my car. All no's. Okay sir, have a great day. One of my new employees came from a competitor who is, shall we say, not as put together as we are. Her former boss had actually called me to yell at me about poaching his consultants. Which, in and of itself, is weird enough. However, a few weeks after she started, the dude rolled up to our office. He had apparently been calling her to get her to finish an analysis for him and she just ghosted him. I went to the lobby to see what the fuck he was doing here. He started in on me again and then she happened to walk by. I didn't fully understand the conversation, but at one point he literally demanded she do this analysis. She just said, or what? And waited a few beats before turning on her heels and walking away. I did the old hand on his back, point to the door, universal symbol for leave, or a large security man will make you leave. Never heard from him again. My ex-husband had some narcissistic qualities. Nothing was ever his fault. No respect for differing opinions, etc. When we separated, I took him to court for child support as I didn't trust we could work it out amongst ourselves. While in the courtroom, he starts getting mouthy with the judge. Same behavior he would have with me whenever we disagreed. He was upset about the amount he was being ordered to pay, even though he and I had discussed prior what the amount would be as I had run it through the formula available on the state website. Anyway, he starts getting mouthy and talking over the judge. It was apparent he had no regard for the situation and proper courtroom etiquette. Again, He always acted as though he was above everything and could do no wrong. The judge wasn't having it at all. He raises his voice and states Mr. Underscore 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 underscore. If you don't cut it out in my courtroom, I will have you detained. He motioned for the sheriff in the courtroom to walk over. I have never seen my ex-husband shut up so quickly. My parents were yelling at me, and then my grandpa walks over and tells them both to sit the fuck down. They both shut the fuck up and sit their ass down on the couch. It was by far the most powerful thing I've ever seen him do. LMAO. At the old courthouse I worked at, the stairs leading to the courtroom were often crowded. As I was trying to squeeze by everyone after stopping downstairs, some guy towards the top of the staircase intentionally stepped in my way and refused to move. After asking him to politely move twice, he made a comment under his breath, but purposefully loud enough so I heard it, that I should essentially go screw myself and that lawyers are entitled assholes and should wait in line like everyone else, which they actually do. He didn't move, so I said sorry and quietly waited behind him for a few minutes. 20 minutes later, I call him out of the courtroom to plea bargain and got the satisfaction of seeing his face when he realized I was the prosecutor. I personally had one that I'm quite proud of. I was one of 2 mechanics responsible for an annual inspection on a Piper Arrow fixed-wing prop aircraft. Aside from dismal compression ratios and some odds and ends in the aircraft that could be overlooked by technicality, there was a problem with the main landing gear motor. The down and lock cycle for that aircraft is required by the OEM, and by extension federal law, to be 30 seconds or less across one cycle of the motor. This plane's gear requires 3 to 5 cycles across about 2 minutes to achieve down lock. I told the owner, who was a famously sleazy lawyer, that he can't fly his plane and I won't sign off the annual until the main landing gear are fixed. The lawyer told me to sign off the annual and he'll get to fixing the gear some other time. When I said no, he proceeded to threaten my job and demanded to have the plane back so he could get another mechanic to sign it off as airworthy. I laughed in his face, impounded his aircraft and notified the FAA. The man eventually gave his aircraft to my business I was working for at the time by way of title lien in order to pay off the massive hangar fees he racked up from his plane sitting in my shop. At my university, it was always fun to watch the people who had been high school popular people think that this sort of popularity would just naturally carry over and that on this campus of thousands, they'd be a big shot or something. It was always fun to see just how many people could not care less about their attention whoring. My dad is 6 feet 3 inches. I'm 6 feet 10 inches. Sometime in my early teens, I shot past him. Dad was a yeller. Not doing what he thought I should be? No discussion. Just yell. But I realized at some point that he wouldn't yell at me if he had to look up while he was doing it. I don't remember what our last argument was about. I just remember that I'd sort of caught on at this point. So I'm in my room in front of the computer. Dad comes in and starts yelling at me. I eventually stand up and start yelling back. Dad makes an excuse to leave. Dad comes back about a half hour later and starts yelling again. But at this point, it's all I can do to not just laugh. I know that the instant I stand up, the argument will end. It actually wound up being really good for our relationship, because Dad realized that he actually had to make valid points, rather than just going into former drill sergeant mode. Edit, obligatory this blew up etc etc. It looks like I unintentionally may have hit a raw nerve for a lot of people, for which I apologize. And I don't think that I had it anywhere near as bad as some of the people who replied. All I can say is that if you find yourself in a situation where you've got parents whose first response is intimidation or worse, look at how most people who responded eventually got out of the situation. Hang in there. It gets better. And you can find people who will help you if that's what is necessary. I was a salesman at a wire and cable place. I got a call Friday morning from a tow truck driver freaking out. He needed a replacement cable for his truck ASAP because the weekends were the big business days for him. Bragging about the big money in people who leave their cars somewhere overnight because they're too drunk to drive home. He was shitty and rude the whole time we were on the phone. He demanded that the cable be cut and shipped immediately. Sent next day air. Saturday delivery, pretty expensive. I rushed his order. Ran back to the warehouse to hand it to the manager myself to make sure it could jump in line and get cut before the next day air guy showed up. But we did it. Rushed every part of it and got it shipped out in time. Every person involved prioritized this order to get it out to him on time. Tow truck dude calls me back later that afternoon saying he got the truck working and no longer needs the cable. He asks to cancel the order and get a refund. I explained to him that because he had it cut to a specific length. If we were to take it back, there would be a restock fee, because we're not going to be able to resell it until someone needs that exact specific length. I also explained that I can't refund the shipping costs because the order has already been shipped the way he demanded it be sent out. Dude loses his mind. Screaming at me, telling me he's going to give the company terrible reviews everywhere and tell all his friends how we're all pieces of shit. There was literally nothing I could do for him. No amount of him being an asshole could uncut and unship that order. Thanks for watching.